3, joined by special guest this evening. We're going to be talking about episode 4 of In Those Genes podcast, where there was a great discussion on rhythm and Blackness. Of course, joined by my co-founder, Misha. Say hey, Misha.
Hi.
As well as Dr. Janina Jeff. Hey, Dr. Jeff, can you also introduce our special guest?
Hi, everyone.
Awesome. And also we have Dr. Aza Alsop. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. No, thank you for joining. So let's kick things off. So for those who are joining live and watch the episode, listen to the episode, we're going to discuss really a lot of the influences of Black folks in music. Goodness, my eye is like emotional just thinking about the episode. So let's start with Dr. Jeff and just thinking about the planning that went into this episode on rhythm and Blackness and the genetics of Black folks and the influence of our rhythm. What was the planning process like for this episode?
Yeah, so the whole season, we wanted to tackle things that have been racialized and also tackle things that we talk about in our community very casually around genetics. And are actually over a year now, we had this episode mapped out, and we knew that we wanted to talk about rhythm, but at the time, my formal background is just basic science genetics, so a lot of work that I've done has never focused on majority of the things that we discussed this season. So it was really hard for me to kind of like wrap my head around how are we going to talk about the genetics of this? And we haven't had some of the producers on the after show, but we have a lead producer, Sam Riddell, and we also have 2 associate producers, and all of them of which were in the writer's room when we were creating this episode. So we knew that in this episode, we wanted to do some type of audio engagement, science experiment. And if you've listened to the episode at the very top, we have a rhythm challenge where we ask people to clap along to see if they can clap along to the beat. So that was, we knew that we wanted to center around that. And we immediately went to and see if we could get both a sociologist to explain to us the history of music, and then really challenging, or at least we thought was going to be challenging, finding someone who works in neuroscience, who also does some work with music. And our associate producer Danya came across AZA, and we were so excited to meet them and talk about the work that they're doing around music, around healing, around neuroscience, and we could not have thought of a better guest. And it was really important. So I think one of the biggest things this season that was extremely important to us is that we break down the science behind these traits that we talk about. So we wanted to really, get granular and talk about, well, what happens in the body when we hear music? What happens in the body when we're dancing? What triggers those actions? And I definitely did not know then, and wanted to lean on some expertise to help get us there. And so if you heard any of the episodes this season, there are a mix of science, which we love to teach, as well as a historical overview to every topic that we're discussing and the history of why it became racialized. And so both of those things were really big points in our episode, and I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Yes, I definitely did. So I actually have a kind of open question. I'll lead with my thoughts on the episode, and one of the major points being around, I think, Black people's influence in rhythm and in music, but also like the question of whether or not there's a genetic advantage that Black folks have in improvising rhythm, and how that all has played out over time. So I'm curious on everyone's thoughts, really, on the final, I guess, answer to that question. I think there were some thoughts at the end of the episode around, whether it's more social or more hereditary. But I'm curious on your personal thoughts of one way or the other from the episode. So we can start with AZA.
Yeah. I think we can't definitively say, yeah, there's like these set of genes that control specifically why, people of African descent seem to have a real proclivity for rhythm and music and sort of manipulating that kind of energy. I think there's definitely research to show that there are cultural differences in the ways that people can perceive rhythm and reproduce rhythms. And it's hard to know how much of that is nature versus nurture, and likely it's some combination of both. But I think given our history culturally and sort of the impact that our music and our energy has had on the world, I think it's very clear that there's definitely something special there, and sort of the ways in which from you know its inception in Africa, music has been used as a tool for communication, as a tool for just life. And it really wasn't like performance art versus like the work, and it was just embedded into everything. And so I think from the time like a child is born, right, they're hearing certain sounds, they're hearing certain rhythms. I think all of that then shapes the brain in a way to be able to perceive certain things, and kind of shapes the nervous system to respond in a certain way. And so I think I can't give a definitive answer to say, yes, it's definitely genetic. I think it's likely a mix of nature versus nature and nurture. And I think that whether it, regardless of what component drives it the most, I think it's clear that culturally and energetically, we've had a very huge influence, not just on American music, but all the way around. And definitely, oh yeah, I agree with that. Even in the womb, I was playing jazz to my daughter when she was in her mother's womb, and I think it worked out well. So for sure.
Misha, any thoughts one way or the other, or what do you feel the stronger influence might be?
I would like to say it's genetic because I want us to have a genetic advantage, but I was thinking about it in the context of like just my life, and I also do think it's nurture and like environment. I spent pretty much the last decade outside of the pandemic in Africa, and I was just thinking about something that I miss about places that are majority Black, and it's just more musical, right? Like there's music all the time, whether it's, someone pounding fufu or at the market shopping, there's just a lot more energy. And I always said that like it feels like someone took the saturation down on the picture here. And I think that is because of the way that African societies and African descendant people just have more music. And it's the same thing I think I look for in cities here. So it's a reason why like New Orleans, right? Or a place like Memphis, because there's a different beat to it. So for me, I would say it was just a great realization. I have a lot more thoughts about this that we'll get into, that we are super dynamic people. It brought up some other, I think for me, another thing, I had this just antecedent. I was in East Africa at an event and music was playing. I realized that I think that was the first time that I had really seen like a bunch of Black people offbeat, but downbeat, but thinking about like they were listening to West African music in East Africa. And so the way that they interpret music was very, like their music is slower. So it really just confirmed to me more of that we're super dynamic and that, we march to the beat of our own drums, whatever that is, and we improvise wherever we are.
Yes. Janina, any thoughts on nature versus nurture?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I learned through the episode is that I thought, with every topic that we talk about, I always think about, well, how can we measure this to test it? And how can we even measure this thing that we're calling rhythm, let alone how can we test it? And so what I learned is that rhythm is way, way, way simpler than I think a lot of people perceive it to be. Also thinking about the many rhythms that are naturally occurring within our bodies. You know, we can think about the circadian rhythm. We can think about the rhythm of our heart, all of the rhythm of our breathing. All of these rhythms are kind of already, you know, we do naturally and involuntarily. And so taking that very basic idea and building upon it further and thinking about, okay, well, how does this extend to parts of, you know, of life? And what we're really, you know, talking about is our ability to intake music and synchronize it with movement. I think that's what most of the people say when they say you have rhythm versus you don't have rhythm. And I'm not fully sure if that is the true definition of how scientists would define having rhythm or not having rhythm, especially when you read some of these papers that try to test and measure this. So that being said, I do also agree with AZA. And actually in this episode, or I should say in the bonus episode, so we're doing a bonus episode next week, we'll have an experiment that AZA and I, you know, hypothesized and drew out. But in that, you know, we're thinking about all of the, if we were to really be able to test this, what are all the things that we would need? And so I do believe that there is something there. You know, I also believe that because music is such a huge part of our culture, and culture is such a huge part of our survival, must be something there, but it's way more complicated than saying you have a rhythm gene and you don't have a rhythm gene. It's a collaboration of a bunch of different things. So I know that's not a straightforward answer, but that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there is a straightforward answer. I definitely agree with everything you all said, and that it is kind of a merging of the two, where, you know, maybe there is some genetic, or there are some genetic variations that we benefit from in terms of how we process sound, and also coordination, as we learned in the episode. But also, I think there's there's underlying social determinants that we've created, more or less, where, as was mentioned in the episode, a lot of popular music has been heavily influenced and created by Black folks. So inherently, we really determine what rhythm is, or how dance and being on beat is perceived. So I think there is kind of both, to your point, that are determining whether or not Black people really have more rhythm than anyone else. I think we do just have advantages. We've created this system of rhythm. Misha, I know you shared some thoughts around one, your time in Africa, but also just the influence of African tradition and culture, and how that's played out in terms of musical styles. Is there anything else that you would speak to? There was like reference in the episode to the, I think it's phylogenetic tree of music. Is there anything that you think really connects throughout the diaspora in terms of how we perceive rhythm, and then also just how we create music?
That's a loaded question, but yes. I think, and I don't know, I'm like, how to unpack that one. So part of that, I think, obviously the banjo and the kora and all the different names. So I'm gonna try to show y'all this family tree of a banjo, little family history take here. This is kind of where we started at. So you have the gourd drum. So the kora traditionally is made from a gourd. And then we get over to, you know, as the evolution of Black music in the States and other places, we get banjos and all the other kinds of string instruments up into guitars that we have today. So I think I would like to see this done for drums too. I think I have a clip to show y'all about talking drums in a second, but I would say that it just really confirms to me that kind of influenced everything. And that our reach is global. And there's always this concept of, so I studied migrations, but just thinking about this concept of just movement of music, of sound, and like the only people weren't the only thing that moved. There's interaction between, when you go through some level of trauma or just migration in general, you're going to take things from where you are and try to bring them into your social life wherever you are. So I think really just, again, it just reaffirms to me that there is a lot of things that we should be speaking to elders about, specifically. It doesn't always have to be the doom and gloom when we're doing oral history and family histories. It could be, where were you at when you first heard Aretha Franklin's Respect, right? Or Kendrick Lamar, whatever it is. You can be recording, your own playlist could be a family history that you record, right? And so I do have some clips to show us, but before we get into there, I don't know if y'all have anything to add, or if Jordan, you had another question before we take a look at a clip from Maya Angelou.
Well, I think you just kind of alluded to something. What does music and rhythm look like in each of your own families? Like just the tradition around it or the practices around it. What are some of the traditions or memories that you have of music within your families?
Yeah, for me, well, I was gonna say for me, like I grew up in the Black church. My dad is a Seventh-day Adventist minister, so music was always a really integral part of not just like entertainment, but also healing and also connecting to spirit and also moving people's energy. And so my family is a big family and very musical. My dad also sings, my mom sings, aunt, grandmother. There's one story, like my grandmother was dying and she was in the hospital. And so everyone kind of got together and like, we have to go, see her before she passes. And they started singing different songs, different praise songs, hymn songs. And she kind of just like woke up and like lived for like another 3 weeks. And it was like this crazy thing. But music is has been such a powerful part of how we commune with each other and how we like bridge gaps in generations and form that cohesiveness. And we borrow from a lot of the different sort of African diasporic traditions in order to do that. So I think music has always been really deep rooted in my life since, I was in the womb.
Yeah, I also have a very musical family. I recently purchased my great grandparents' house. And one was, my great grandfather was the pastor at an AME Methodist church. And they had 12 children, and all 12 children could play the piano. And all 12 children, they had to learn how to play the piano. We're very musical. And, that was my grandmother's generation. And then when they raised their children, they did the same thing. Everyone had an instrument. And my instrument was the saxophone. So when I was in high school, I was in the band. And Jordan, I know you're new to New Orleans, but band culture here, like I like to tell people when they did the drum line, like that's really like that's New Orleans high schools, not not college. And Mardi Gras is all, Black Mardi Gras. The Black Mardi Gras experience is very focused on a battle of the bands, of the high school bands. And so it's a really big culture here in New Orleans. But music has always been a part of my life. And I think a lot of us have had stories, or we can think about genres of music that are, intentional for certain moments in time, right? When we hear, Frankie Beverly and Maze, we all think about family reunions, right? When we hear gospel music, even if we are not, Christian or, deep into religious practice, we think about Sunday mornings. When we hear old songs or gospel, people always talk about, well, what's the music that your mom or your grandma cleaned to, right? And in my family, that music was 1960 to 1985 R&B, Motown, everything that came from Detroit. In fact, when I was growing up, my dad would play music on the record player, and my brother and I had to guess who it was. And it was like a fierce competition, right? We would listen to music in the car and we had to guess who the artist was. So I am very familiar with music, but it was that kind of shaped my, love for music. And now when I think about music, when I hear songs, I connect those things to different parts of my life. And I think someone had posted in the chat that, someone posted that music and dance are a part of our survival. That was a hypothesis that I had. And actually in the episode, when we first started to think about the episode, we wanted to, Sam wanted to kind of do the history of the drum. So it's so interesting that you did the phylogenetic tree of the banjo, because we were thinking about, well, the drum is something that's consistent across all genres of music, and that specifically the drum is something that we personally, universally connect to. And so what's the story of the drum? So we veered away from that, but I still think it's pretty cool. And not here today is Dr. Fadera Headley, who was also on the show and gave us a lot of insight about the history of music itself and how it all connects back to, a lot of it connects back to our Blackness and our ancestors.
I'm trying to think. For me, I have like two antecedents here, but I was thinking about it recently of how my grandmother my nanny would clean up and listen to Aretha Franklin's Do Right Woman. And thinking back now, I'm wondering if she was really just mad at my grandfather the whole time that she was listening to that. Because, shortly after that they divorced, but just thinking about how I know that song, that's like my song now. But I'm like, when I listen to it, I'm like, I feel like residual madness from how she was singing it, and she would listen to it all day on repeat. And I'm just like, wow. And also she would listen to Betty Wright, and it reminds me of the first time I actually got in trouble. And so my mom heard me singing Woman to Woman, and I think I was maybe like 8. And so I got in really big trouble for singing the song. I didn't understand. I just, it's a pop. But I got in a lot of trouble. But I think the generational song that loops my family together is actually Johnny Taylor's Last $2. I feel like everybody in my family knows that. And then again, here in Dallas, band culture in high school is really big. So I remember always wanting to grow up and play the clarinet and be in the marching band, and then going to a predominantly white high school and realizing that they don't do band the same way as the Black Dallas schools. So I actually quit band because of that. But Jordan, what about you?
Well, funny that band keeps coming up. I grew up listening to a lot of smooth jazz in my household. My parents were both pretty big fans. And so I think I developed this not only appreciation for jazz and instrumentation, but also I decided to try my hand at jazz, and the alto and tenor sax just didn't work out. But I definitely still have that appreciation for lyric-less music, or like really a lot of musicality through the instrumentation. So things like jazz, house music, and other like non-lyrical music is a lot of what I listen to now. So it's interesting to think about that different influence that what you grow up hearing has on not only your musical taste, but like what you do, your memories, and all of that. Misha, I'll hand it back to you with the, I know you had a clip one.
Yes. So, bit of a family history moment. We're going to have 3 of them. But first, so I mentioned being in Africa earlier. And one of the people that inspired me to go to Ghana and want to stay in Ghana was actually Dr. Maya Angelou, who just so happens to be from the same county that Jordan and I's family is from, in Hempstead County, Arkansas. She lived with her grandmother in Stamps, Arkansas. And she went to Ghana during the 50s and 60s to take her son to school, actually. And he has a tragic accident. She ends up living in Ghana and working with the ethnomusicologist, whose grandson is now kind of Ghana's version of Talib Kweli. His name is Manifest. I'll post some things in it. But in doing that, she started a show when she came back called Blacks, Blues, and Black. And I'm going to show a clip from that. But before I do, Dr. Jeff shared with us a photo from her family history that I'll let her talk about. As soon as I get it up. There we go. Dr. Jeff, tell us about this picture.
Yeah, so this is a picture of my grandfather on the left, Dr. Morris FX Jeff Jr. And next to him is the one and only Dr. Maya Angelou. And I posted this on 4th of July last year, which was the day he was born, my grandfather. And he used to be a part of the National Black Social Workers, and they used to have a variety of conferences. And one of the conferences is a conference that he and Maya Angelou, and also in this, we have a very young Iana Vincent, who was also at this conference that he invited her to. I think it's the last page. I don't know if you can keep going. There she is. Yeah. And that's him in the background. And so my grandfather knew Maya Angelou, and she was a poet, and my grandfather also was a poet. He also wrote a bunch of different things. I actually have been going through his writing in his old office where I sometimes work now since I've been here. One of these days we can share some of those short stories that he wrote. But really amazing. I didn't know, as a child, or think, I knew of Maya Angelou, but I didn't know how close he was to her, which is, really a full circle moment. So that is the history. This conference that they used to have would be on Jekyll Island, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, but Jekyll Island is located off the coast of Georgia. And it is thought to be places where some of the last illegal slave ships came through after slavery was abolished. And so my grandfather and other African-centric people of the diaspora across the country would gather there and do a lot of ritual practice. That picture there is a picture of them doing a Harambe circle, which I can describe that at another time. But a Harambe circle is a tradition my grandfather came up with, where we gather in circle. And he had a lot of theories around circles and how circles complete and restore and are symbolic of the Black community, and specifically the Black family. But it's a call to the ancestors. And so we would do that on Jekyll Island, and they had all kinds of programmings. I can share some pictures of young me in a dashiki, also attending Jekyll Island. And so rich history there, but yes.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts before I share the video? I know you have a hard stop. We're going to show a clip from Maya Angelou and continue the conversation just a little bit.
Yeah, continue.
Okay. A little interlude while I get this ready. What's your favorite song of all time?
I don't think I can pick a song.
That's a very unfair question.
I don't know if I can pick a song. Jordan, do you have a song?
I do, but I'll cop out and say that just like anything where Ella Fitzgerald is like improvising. One
I'll throw out Someday We'll All Be Free by Donny Hathaway. I don't have one favorite song, but that's definitely one of the ones that speaks to me a lot.
Oh, guys, I really don't have a favorite. I can't.
I have favorites for different times of life, but I don't know why for the last year I've been obsessed with Footsteps in the Dark, and everybody that sampled it and listening to this sample playlist from Town Days and how different artists are sampling it now. So that's what I'm currently obsessed with. I don't even know anything Beyonce usually, but also Aretha Franklin. So I'm going to play this clip from Angelou from the 60s. If you can, make sure your mic is muted, and I'll get this going.
The South, well, B.B. King said a couple of weeks ago that many of our people were spiritual. They prayed and sang. But he suggests that the blues came out of the realization that singing and praying to God, these are his words, simply wasn't getting the man up off his back. So some of our people decided to sing about what was really happening to them. So they wrote some blues. Big Bill Broonzy has a blues that says, I don't want no help, baby. I don't need no oil in my hand. I don't want no women round me, always raising sand when I've been drinking. When I've been drinking. When I come home, baby, please let me lay down and rest. I want somebody to hold me, to lay me in my bed. Talk, baby, talk to me and hold my head when I've been drinking. When I've been drinking. When I come home, baby, please let me lay down and rest. Put me up, baby, in a big wheelchair. Roll me, baby, roll me, baby, roll me anywhere when I've been drinking. Yeah. When I've been drinking. When I come home, baby, please let me lay down and rest. That's one. There's another one from that period that was sung by Arthur Big Boy Crudup, and it's one of the oldest blues. It has a feeling that is partly still, I mean, one can still see more of the African influence in it because of the meter. The meter is so strange. It says, baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go back to New Orleans. They'll feed you rice and beans, the worst you've ever seen. Baby, please don't go. You got me way down here. You got me way down here. You got me way down here beneath the forks in the road. You treat me like a dog. You make me walk the log. You got me way down here. There is one man gone. Already one man gone. There's one man gone from the county farm with his shackles on. You know it's one man gone. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go back to New Orleans. You feed me rice and beans, the worst you've ever seen. And so forth. That's one style of the blues. Louis Armstrong came along in New Orleans and created, along with Kid Ory and King Creole and that Papa Celestine and Paul Yancey and Ma Yancey, a style of music called the New Orleans Jazz. The first time the music, the Christian music or the spirituals, had been done in a secular way was when Louis Armstrong sang and played When the Saints Go Marching In, and I'm sure everybody knows that. We don't have to just lay down these particular ones. Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith and Ma Smith were women who carried the idea even further. I mean, as singers, that the blues was supposed to tell you something about their lives. The songs they sang talked about, again, natural phenomena. Bessie Smith sang a song about the flood in Texas or someplace. Ma Rainey sang about the heat one summer when it was just so hot that she couldn't have good relations with people. Bessie Smith sang a song called "Give Me a Pigfoot and a Bottle of Beer. Love me 'cause I really don't care. I'm here to tell you. Love me 'cause I really don't care. Oh, give me a pigfoot and a bottle of gin. Love me 'cause I'm in my sin. I'm here to tell you." She talked about, the pigfoot and a bottle of beer is very important in the Black American life. And so she was talking about something really for real. Leadbelly and Jelly Roll Martin came along, and Cow Davenport came along and put some more juice to the blues, and we got into a boogie woogie style, which was very famous for a while. Meet Lux Lewis and Fats Waller were men who also helped the music to reach another stage. Ethel Waters sang a song called "Happiness is Just a Thing Called Joe." And I think what we're seeing today is a great gap between, say, that song and the songs that are being done today. Today, well, those songs used to say, "My man is no good, but I love him just the same. He's mean and evil and he beats me," and so forth. And that's a pretty negative position and point of view. It may be true, but why make a song about it? But I don't think it's as true today, say, as it was 40 years ago. Now today, our young people are singing songs that have a great significance for the struggle towards liberty. One of the most popular songs today is a song by Aretha Franklin that says "Think." There's another one that says "Give me a little respect when I come home." She's not playing. The person who wrote that song wasn't playing. Otis Redding wasn't playing. There's a song that was very popular a few months ago that said, "We're moving on up. We're a winner." This is a point of view that we have got to come to totally, collectively. I'm speaking to my people. We must come there collectively, that we are winners. Now, when we trace the music, see what happened. See that why this program is called Blacks, Blues, Black, is that at one point, and in Africa, we were blacks. Then we came to the States and we sang the blues for 349 years, Jim. It was really bad. We are today black. This is a positive statement. That is to say that we have done everything. We have been as defeated as any people can be, and we have triumphed. We must now join the triumph, you see. So when the Hesitations have a song now called "Who Will Answer?" And the young people, I don't know them, but they are singing it with such fervor that some of you must answer it. Some of you, the leadership must come from somewhere. And each one of the programs I'm doing, I hope certainly that they'll be entertaining. But you know also, if you have watched the other 3 or 4, then you know also that I will take some time to talk to you. I will use this medium to talk to you. Now, I finished my preaching.
What are your first reactions and thoughts on what she had to say about the importance of music and the genealogy of music for Black people?
Yeah, I think, what she highlights is the central role that music has always had for people of African descent in our just daily life and our ability to connect to each other in spirit, but then in our traversed through the United States and sort of Western slavery, it was sort of a central place for healing. And it's always been that way, from the slave songs through the spirituals, through blues, through jazz, through R&B, hip hop, the whole lineage of music. It's always at the core of the revolutionary effort. It's always what is galvanizing and putting the energy behind this. I'm actually writing a paper on this right now, because I think as people today, we're at a critical point where we have to like really start to understand what the power of music is, and like how the messaging that we put in our music is actually embedded into the subconscious and can drive our behaviors in different ways. I think this is something the music industry knows well and capitalizes on in various ways. And it's time for us to sort of own that power. And there are artists now that are trying to do that more and more, but collectively we have to start owning that power and figuring out the ways in which we can again harness that healing energy of music to really, push to the next level of liberation. She mentions sort of which each stage people are pushing forward the genre in a new way to meet the demands of the new culture, right? Jazz emerges out of the migration north and the new struggles that are being faced. And so I think we're at this point in hip hop, and like you start hearing things like Afro beats are now like that energy is now kind of pushing. And so I think as a psychiatrist and as a musician and someone who is really using music in that space to heal, I think it's such a powerful tool. And the only reason we kind of don't think of it that way is because many times we've adopted this Eurocentric view of music as performance art or music as sort of a side thing, but it's always been central to healing for us. And it's time for us to kind of reclaim that heritage and use that like very intentionally. And that's something I'm really sort of passionate and excited about. So I was really kind of excited to hear her just outline that lineage.
And where can people follow your work so they can hear about this paper and anything else that you have going on?
Yeah, they can follow me on Instagram at AZA the Messenger. That's one place. Or if you just Google AZA Allsop, you'll find things. Yeah.
All right, so Google him basically. Janina, what do you think?
First of all, just hearing Maya's voice was just like everything I needed. I haven't heard it in a while, so it was very warm to hear. So thank you for that. The first thing I thought in hearing her talk, it reminded me, and I should have said this earlier, was the tradition of Armstrong Park here in New Orleans. And for those of you who don't know, Armstrong Park is located in New Orleans, is Louis Armstrong Park. It wasn't always called that, but it was always a central place where African descent people in New Orleans gathered for hundreds of years. And it was a place where, and if you're familiar with New Orleans, you know that our culture and our religion is very, very much so a mixture of indigenous African religion and culture, and all of that richness being here. And musically, every Sunday, that would be an expression. We would have a drum circle and or a musical celebration of the week. And to this day, that tradition still carries on here in New Orleans, where you can go to Armstrong Park and there is a drum circle. But it's very interesting to me, I forgot to mention that, of just how the rich heritage, how that was once a place, the only day where most of our ancestors who were enslaved had off. And they used that day to celebrate and dance and celebrate with music and find joy there. And so one of the things that was striking about what Maya said was, how blues was this central part of our music for hundreds of years, right? But they're also, all of the blues wasn't always sad, all of the blues did include some joy. Blues did include some celebration, some storytelling. I mean, it really was a way of telling story. And it was just great to hear that. And it reminded me of Louis Armstrong Park here in New Orleans. So.
Jordan, what about for you?
I thought about one of the comments that came up in the chat, I think from Terry, where music is thought of as not just something that we listen to while we're doing different things. And there was mention of that in the episode where you might be working, you might be cleaning, whatever you're doing, you might be listening to music, but also there's storytelling to what Janina was just talking about in these songs, especially with the blues and rhythm and blues, where you can empathize with what's going on. There's something there. There's substance and content to digest and to relate to that really speaks to a cultural and lived experience. So hearing the evolution of that, and I hope somebody heard that Janina, that can sample that and make it into a track, because Maya needs to be sampled. Who knew she was out here cutting up? So yeah, there were a lot of thoughts, I think, about just the lived and the evolution of our lived experience.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, just from a family history perspective, what kind of genealogical information or what kind of family history information might you find in music?
That's a good question. One thing that is very that has a stronger genetic component is voice, right? And the use of voice, which was our first musical instrument. And so when I think about that, I think about, I don't know if you have heard your parents speak, if your voice sounds similar to your parents or your siblings. And I find that connection to be very fascinating. So when I think about it in that regard, and genealogy specifically, I think about how voice seems to be somewhat consistent through generations. Not always, but sometimes. Another, and I say that because even people who are not raised with their parents can still have the same voice and pitch as their parents. There's actually a lot of genetics research that talks genetics of perfect pitch and having pitch. And so but I also, when I think about family history, oral history, genealogy, I think about some of the songs that, maybe are not mainstream commercial songs that our parents sing to us. Another thing I think about that has been passed on from generation to generation is song through hand games. So it's so fascinating to me to see young Black girls doing the same songs when we're playing, hand games that I was doing, that my mother was doing, that her grandmother was doing, that her great grandmother was doing. And that's something that's very present now that I just think is such a beautiful thing. Yeah, I'm trying to think music itself, or I guess composed music. I can't think of anything, but again, the drum. I think the drum is a good example of that too. I was also going to say, someone in the chat put "As" by Stevie Wonder. I was going to say that because that's one of my favorite songs too, but it changes.
I'll touch on that. So,
Jordan,
can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, so thinking about, I guess, music and family history in high school, which is around the time that I started looking into my family's history, I don't think I specifically asked about what sort of music my elders or like family members listened to back in the day, but I do remember learning that my paternal grandmother used to listen to Otis Redding a lot. And that kind of just knowing that exposed me to a whole genre of music and a whole era of music. And then my maternal grandmother used to listen to opera. And so that actually did the same, where I was curious, what was she listening to? But finding an appreciation for both. And so in the spirit of one, family history, but also the limited time that we may have with our elders, I definitely encourage those listening to, ask that question of what sort of things they appreciated, what dances were your grandparents doing back in the day, and get them to show you if they can. So that's just kind of one thing that I think connects for me in terms of family and music.
AZA, what about you?
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of it is passed on in my family through like spirituals and certain hymns that like my grandparents, my great grandparents found a lot of power and magic and strength in. And because they had those experiences, they passed that on to their children. And like when we get together and like my grandmother breaks into a song and then everyone is like, okay, let's hop in on this. And again, even if you're not super Christian or whatever, you still feel the power and the resonance that it has, and the importance that it has. And so I think some of those songs end up kind of filtering through the generations just because they've had so much meaning for some of the struggles that the older generations have gone through. And I mean, that's how the spirituals, were birthed, because of the strength that they gave. So for my family, that's a lot of how the music that we sing today when we get together, has been passed on.
Yes, I can relate to all of that. I think for me, if I hear Troubles of the World by Mahalia Jackson, I automatically think of my great grandmother, to the point where she even left in her pre-need planning for her funeral, had a list of the songs that she wanted people to sing, and that was on there. And who she wanted to sing it. Like nobody else could sing it. And if that person wasn't alive, you need to find the recording of it and it needs to be played. So I think about that. And then Tasia just said something that I've never heard of. She said her grandpa's favorite dance was the possum waddle, and he was born in the 1930s. So I'm gonna have to go figure out what the possum waddle is. Or maybe you can make us a video and demonstrate what that is. But possum waddle. That's a new one. I was gonna show y'all just one more clip of family history, and then just also encourage y'all to think about ways that, if your family has like a hymn book, right? That's something that is valuable and should be preserved. If it's sheet music that someone has written, these are things like you might not ever find on Ancestry, or a museum might not ever, have. But if it's been important to your family, that's something that, you should preserve or could preserve. And also just encourage you all to ask questions around music and let that be like a gateway. Like, what song did they play at your wedding? If you have family members who you feel like won't talk, ask them about other things, or play the song and see if, they start to sing, and then let them just ask them where they at when they first heard it, right? And I've been able through that to get people who seemingly won't talk about anything to just open up and start talking about everything. We have a few minutes left, but I wanted to show you all another very important. I meant to share this earlier, but we were talking about spirituals, and I wanted to share about the ring shout and Gullah Geechee people, and specifically in the Gullah Geechee corridor. So in McIntosh County, Georgia, there's a family that still practices what's called a ring shout, and I'm gonna start playing that now. Let me get it going.
I am the stick man of the McIntosh County Shouters. My mother is Carla Jordan, who is one of the shouters. My grandmother is Carletha Sullivan. My great-grandmother was Onita Ellison, who was one of the original shouters. My great-great-grandmother was Martha Palmer, and my great-great-great-grandmother was Amy Jenkins. This, for me, is my way of connecting to those old souls, those old spirits that I did not have the opportunity to meet.
This man that was a great inspiration for me to singing. This man right here, Reverend Nathan Palmer. It's just like Brent's grandmother, they used to get together and sing. That's why he knew all them songs, because they used to get up there and sing and shout.
Who brought the shout for us from Africa
That's
to
right.
America, which is Martha Palmer, my great-grandmother.
It's Martha right here.
One of the songs that I absolutely love is Believer, Believer. That's the very last song that we got from Lawrence before he passed. Believer, 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 I know. Lord, believer, 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 oh, I know. My God, believer, 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 I know. Lord, believer, believer, that one time of year, the entire community would come together, and whatever came out of their fields or whatever crops that they had that they could, give, they would put it all on the table. So that's really where the shout fit in, more so as a social thing as well as a religious thing, to thank God for all that He has brought them throughout the year. Because there's certain people who didn't make it.
When we first started shouting, people thought it was a disgrace. When I was a girl, all of the other people in McIntosh County used to tease the people from this community because we spoke in the dialect. And one thing about a shout song, you can take this to the bank. You cannot sing a shout song unless you speak in the Geechee Gullah Geechee dialect. And some of the same people that said it was a disgrace, now they're trying to organize a little group and perform.
All right, so we have about 3 minutes. Are there any closing thoughts? I know that I'm looking forward to any studies around this that y'all want to do. I have my own theories of my own that I would like to throw in there and see if y'all want to investigate. But if there's anyone in the audience that has any additional things to share, and if you have any closing thoughts, I'll let Jordan wrap us up.
Well, thank you for sharing that video. Really quick, I thought that last piece she said was really interesting around basically if you don't appreciate it and if you don't use it, you lose it, where they're trying to imitate what they neglected at first. So that was interesting, and thank you for sharing that. Janina, can you share with us anything upcoming for the podcast, etc.? What we're looking forward to?
Yes. So next week, next Tuesday, we are going to play a bonus episode that was taken from this episode where AZA and I kind of talk about what a study would look like if we were to really study the genetics of rhythm in African descended people, with all the resources and all the neuroscience and all the genetics and all the best phenotyping that we could get. And so you'll hear that. It'll be a short mini bonus episode that will air next Tuesday, and it'll be about 10 to 15 minutes. And then in Black History Month, we want to encourage all of our listeners to continue to have conversations with your elders. Record those conversations if you have permission. And we encourage you to also, a really great idea that you mentioned earlier, Misha, is that play some music, hear some of their memories centered around music. And we really want to emphasize as Black History Month the importance of oral story as being a part of our family history. And we want to encourage everyone to do that. So we will be airing an episode, one of my favorite episodes from season 1, with our elders. This episode features my elders here in New Orleans. Before I was living here, we traveled here and we spoke to our elders about their feelings around genetic ancestry testing. But we'll be re-airing that episode and encouraging everyone to spend time with their elders in Black History Month.
Awesome. Definitely looking forward to that. AZA, are there any closing thoughts that you have, whether to the episode or just anything you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on this platform, and Janina for being on the podcast. The podcast was a lot of fun. I just want to encourage everybody to stay rooted in the energy of the African diaspora. It's special. Our music is special, and it's always a place we can go back to for grounding and for healing and to connect to our ancestral, our ancestral energy. So just want to encourage everybody to stay with that and just be on the lookout for the movement.
And to that, I say Ashe. I don't think we have any closing announcements, but we'll be here. You'll hear from us on the newsletter. You can find out about the newsletter and anything we have going on at kinkofa.com. Other than that, we'll see y'all next time. Thank y'all for joining us. Talk to you later.